In 1995, Carl Sagan's book, The Demon-Haunted World, Carl wanted to show that much of our thinking derives from metaphor and mythology and superstition, and he was truly working to encourage people to learn critical and skeptical thinking, which I thoroughly support. He also foresaw a future where the US will fall into a period of terrible decline. And I wanted to read this quote from the book, quote, "I have a foreboding of America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hand of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness." This prediction, in many respects, appears to be frighteningly accurate assessment of our current society. And while it isn't a complete assessment, we are a deeply troubled country. And frankly, with climate collapse looming, a deeply troubled world. Now, switching gears for a moment, I next want to address love, and in particular, love as a methodology for learning. A simple definition of a methodology for learning is it's just a method chosen to achieve a teaching goal. It might be teacher-centered or student-centered. It might be Montessori, or it might be inquiry-based learning. However, if we are to achieve peace and end war, if we are to achieve the learning and evolution of human consciousness as offered by Jesus and other great teachers, love needs to be our methodology. With that thought in mind, there are several quotes on love which will help illustrate some of this. One is by Leo Tolstoy, and quote, "Love is life, all, everything that I understand only because I love. Everything exists only because I love. Everything is united by it alone. Love is God." A quote by Buckminster Fuller, "Love is omni-inclusive, progressively exquisite, understanding and compassionately attuned to the other than self." And the great poet Rumi tells us, "Love is the bridge to everywhere." And finally, I wanted to quote Cornel West, "Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public." And paraphrasing him, if Jesus is inside of you, you have love that cuts across all boundaries. These are the ingredients of the larger context I want to place this talk within. Now, let's consider climate and militarism. First, the climate. Generally speaking, most of us know that the climate is fragile, and a climate favorable to humanity is on the brink of collapse. Depending on where you live, life-threatening conditions, including fire, flooding, drought, extreme winds, or heat, may already have been experienced. And of course, you had Ida in New York City, a huge wake-up call. What hasn't been experienced, and hopefully will not, is the complete melting of the polar ice caps, resulting in the oceans rising and flooding many coastal cities. And then there's the possibility of the shutting down of the North Atlantic currents, including the Gulf Stream. And if this happens, all bets are off. This is a massive current system that is critical to the heat distribution across the entire planet. There is the possibility of a massive release of methane gas, no longer trapped by the permafrost. And if that's released, we will see rapid warming. The meltdown of nuclear power plants caused by unexpected catastrophic climate events. And that's already been illustrated by Fukushima. And then, of course, we're entering into a new phase, and we don't really know all of the weather events we are yet to experience. Now, what's the UN telling us in their reports? The COVID-19 pandemic has not curbed rising levels of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide levels have pushed past another record threshold after rising in 2019 at a rate faster than the average last 10 years. Climate change is widespread and rapidly intensifying. Every region on Earth is affected. And 2020 was one of the 3 warmest years on record. And that was despite a cooling La Nina event. And the global average temperature was about 1.2 Celsius above the pre-industrial parenthesis 1850 through 1900 level. The last 6 years since 2015 have been the warmest on record, and those are quotes. US Army, how are they addressing climate threats? I thought I would look there. The US military takes the climate change very seriously, more seriously than any other institution probably in the country. And they consider it an enormous threat to national security and defense objectives. And so what do they see? As they see the possibilities of humanitarian disasters, short and long, and social and economic disruptions. They see the collapse of weak governments coming, new theaters of operation opening, both military and commercial. And they see extreme weather events, rising sea levels, threatening cities, military installations, infrastructure, and a large-scale human migration, along with water and food scarcity. And what are they doing? They're modeling and simulating activities that include climate risk analysis in their daily operational missions. They're investing in technologies to provide enhanced capabilities for operational energy translated into they're really working on renewables and putting them into use. They do blackout drills at their bases. They're learning how to effectively operate if they're suddenly cut off the normal grid. And they are also working on having a supply chain backup so that if they need materials, they will not find themselves short when the normal supply chains have been cut. And all of this led me to think about how you as an individual, and myself too included, certainly we might look at our own immediate homes and see them as our installations. And there are some really simple steps, such as, do you have batteries for a radio in case you're cut off the power grid? Do you have candles or backup lighting? In any case, the Army is also working on making the soldier resilient, a solar soldier, if you will, so that they're able to work in very hot climates and where there's a scarcity of water and resources. And they also see climate change, which will lead to competition for scarce resources and the spread of infectious diseases. Now, how does this connect with peace? And I'm turning to Lindsay Kashgarian. She spoke recently at the 23rd Annual Kateri Peace Conference, and she's the director of the National Priorities Project. And I'm actually doing a summary of her talk, which was really excellent. And I'm deeply indebted to her for all this wonderful material. And you can see all of this material. We will share a link later on in the program in the chat. Her talk is recorded. In any case, Militarism intersects with climate change, and this is how we actually really have to address militarism to, if we are to restore the climate. In the last 20 years, 21 trillion has been spent on militarism. What's $1 trillion? None of us can visualize that. So in illustration, 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 31.7 years. 1 trillion seconds is 31,710 years. $1 trillion is a huge amount of money. Recently, the 1 in 500 Americans have died from the pandemic, and we will see increased homelessness and evictions. Last summer, 1/3 of Americans experienced some form of extreme weather event. All of this is happening. And what's the government doing? Well, war is truly one of the few bipartisan efforts that the Republicans and the Democrats can seem to agree on. And we need to ask, why is there always enough money for war? And when it comes to the American people, why isn't it possible to care for the American people? When it comes to renewable energy, childcare, healthcare, ending poverty, we're always told we can't afford it. Yet, according to the National Priorities Project, it would take approximately 3.5 trillion over 10 years to address these problems. Can we find the political will to create change and transform the war economy? $4.5 trillion would decarbonize the electric grid. 5 million jobs at $15 an hour with benefits and cost living adjustments for 10 years would cost approximately $2.3 trillion. Student debt can be forgiven for $1.7 trillion. These concerns are less than half of the 21 trillion spent since 9/11. And Lindsay also pointed out in her report a B-52 Strata Fortress bomber by the Air Force in 1 hour uses the same amount of fuel the average car uses in 7 years. We also know there's a huge racism component of the US foreign policy and militarism targeting Black and brown people. And it's come home too, because we now have a militarized police force and they're often targeting Black and brown people. The Pentagon is the largest institutionalized user of fossil fuel, and it emits more greenhouse gases than a medium-sized country. Militarism and the confrontational approach to China undermines the possibility of working together with China. And boy, do we ever need to work together with China. And why so? Because climate change is a global problem and cannot be solved by any one country. And the United States and China top the list of fossil fuel emissions. So we need diplomatic solutions. Multilateral international law works far better than war. How are we doing lately? Well, we have increased the Pentagon's budget, and it's $778 billion in the new federal budget. And this is more than the next 11 largest spending countries who spend money on their militaries combined. According to the Brown University study, the US is involved in the war on terror in 85 different countries right now. There are 750 military installations around the world in foreign countries, 200,000 troops overseas. We need to cut the Pentagon budget, and there is a bill that is asking to cut the budget by 10%. Is this enough? No, it's not enough, but it's a place to start. So again, that's from Lindsay Kashgarian's talk on, and she's the director of the National Priorities Project, and thank you, Lindsay. The second existential threat to humanity I want to address today is nuclear weapons. And I'm going to work with the material presented by Cynthia Lazaroff, and she also spoke at the Kateri Peace Conference. and her videotape presentation in the complete version is available. And her talk was entitled Awakening to Action. Cynthia interviewed many world experts in 2017 while working on a film entitled U.S.-Russian Relations Quest for Stability. Among them was William Perry, former U.S. Secretary of Defense, and Mikhail Gorbachev. And in the William Perry interview, he said, "We are at risk of a nuclear war now, and we are sleepwalking," this is a quote, "we are sleepwalking into a nuclear catastrophe, and we must wake up." In December of 2017, Cynthia interviewed Mikhail Gorbachev. He said, "Relations are going from bad to worse. We must break out of this current situation. And if someone loses their nerve, we won't survive." And now we move forward to January 13, 2018. Cynthia lives in Hawaii. Like most everyone else, Cynthia receives an emergency alert. Inbound missile threat to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. So where do you go? There are no shelters. What do you do? Cynthia grabs her computer and phone. Does she have 14 days of food and water ready, as was recommended by the local government? This is during the period when Trump is feuding with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. She realizes she's made no preparations for her family. And she wonders, is this the beginning of the end? The beginning of an accidental nuclear war? Her experience lasted 38 minutes until notification came that this was a false alarm. For her, it was 38 minutes and the rest of her life. She is awakened to action. She said her first feeling after this experience was gratitude. Gratitude for a second chance. And since then, Cynthia has been one of the most active anti-nuclear activists imaginable. She's developed the Nuclear Playbook, a 10-step program to nuclear disarmament. I'm going to quickly read just the first 5. Pursue a verifiable agreement among nuclear states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Renounce the option of using nuclear weapons first. End the sole unchecked authority of any US president or any one president anywhere to launch a nuclear attack. Agree to take nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. Cancel the plan to replace the entire US arsenal with enhanced weapons and negotiated deep cuts in US and Russian arsenals. Eliminate ICBMs. Cynthia said, Cynthia's been instrumental in developing the organization Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy. And one thing in which wasn't one in Cynthia's talk that I wanted to add, and there's a background noise. I hope it's not interrupting too badly. I'm in a public library for their Wi-Fi. But anyway, to continue, it's off. Thank you. What I was saying is, if 300 nuclear weapons are detonated in cities around the world, 300, the detonation and the consuming fires of the city would put enough smoke and soot into the air to block off 70% of the sunlight for 10 years. And what that would mean to us is that most of us would starve to death in about 2 years. So there are many, many nuclear weapons. I believe the United States has at least 5,000, and just 300 nuclear weapons could end the world. Now, moving on to something just, far more hopeful and really very beautiful. I now want to mention Sister Megan Rice. Sister Megan Rice was a dear friend of mine. We worked together at the Nevada Desert Experience in Las Vegas, Nevada. And she died on October 10th of this year, not long ago. She was such a tremendous force for good and spent many years of her life working to abolish nuclear weapons. And along with Sister Megan, Michael Wally, and Greg Biorte Obed performed the Transform Now Plowshares Action in Oak Ridge, Tennessee at the Y-12 complex. This was supposed to be the Fort Knox of uranium storage, and yet Sister Megan and Michael and Greg cut through the fence and walked up to the vault and stood there for several hours or more until security came. And I was with Sister Megan at her trial in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I took this short video clip of Megan. It reflects her spirit and who she is and was so beautifully. And as many of you know, she was sent to prison for this action and actually did time in the prison facility in Brooklyn. So now, please, if you can, Ken, would you play the video clip of Sister Megan, Swords into Plowshares? This will give you a very good idea of what a beautiful and wonderful woman and that she was. And I know people who know her are grieving and miss her. She was just such a tremendous spirit. So Ken, please.
There you go.
Ever since we set out at 2:30 in the morning on the 28th of July.
How's that?
Being led.
By the Holy Spirit?
Well, whatever it certainly is holy. Yeah, she is holy.
She is. That's wonderful.
And that's W-O-L-L-Y too.
Okay. What else do you have to say this morning, Megan?
Yeah, and the way these, what do you call them, reporters or recorders are also selecting what they put there to be so focused. I mean, what was it last, that we saw this morning, that CNN thing, you know? He captured an hour and a half of truth, hope, trust, and just pulled out the essence in the sense that the planet is under sabotage. This lovely, lovely planet is in an experience of desperate, imminent sabotage.
So let me hear you say transform now.
So accept that we also are invited and have the gift to transform it now into an almost infinite number of possibilities, all of which are totally life-enhancing.
Thank you, Megan.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Thank you so much.
Love is real. Real is love. Love is feeling. Feeling love. Love is wanting.
I'll put this link in the chat for anyone who had difficulty hearing the audio.
Thank you. Some of the people are in the video also there was Father Jerry Zawada, Father Louis Vitale, Father Bill Bixel, all great activists. And Megan certainly will be missed. I know I'll miss her. I do wish I had her courage and her strength. She was tremendous. in that video, the last thing she said is, let's do it. So what is it we are to do? We need to ask ourselves, are we simply victims of a relentless and inevitable future? Or can we make choices and take life-affirming action? Another great influence on my life was Father Dan Berrigan. And he said, the difference between doing something and doing nothing is everything. What is it we are to do? I'm going to offer you some suggestions. I mean, and I'm sure you all know many things you can do, but the first thing I would suggest is call your representatives, 202-224-3121, and tell them to cut the Pentagon budget by 10% minimum. Second thing is honor the new nuclear weapons treaty, eliminate nuclear weapons. What smaller things can we do in terms of those? It's easy enough to make a phone call, and I don't want to minimize that, but what can you do as an individual in your community is what I'm really trying to say. One thing that I used to do was go to school board meetings and use the public comment section, and I asked them to move the military recruiters out of the schools. And when you go to a school board meeting, you are in mainstream America now. You are no longer just speaking to the choir. And actually, my school board, while they didn't move the recruiters out of the school, they did put some limits on them. And what about suggesting school gardens to reconnect students to the earth? And how about courses in environmental justice and really careful stewardship of our resources? What's other things you can do? I am told planting a tree is probably the #1 activity an individual can do to help the environment. Think carefully about the use of your car, take public transportation when you can. A really simple thing that will save a lot of electricity is turn off your computer modem at night. And a dear friend of mine has been teaching me about bees. And bees are our #1 pollinator and are in a state of collapse between the varroa mites, the pesticides, and the misuse and poor care of bees. Bee colonies are collapsing, and it's symptomatic of human colony collapse. Well, how can you help? You can grow flowers and feed the bees, and you will have tremendous beauty right at your doorstep or on your windowsill. And you can stop using pesticides too. That will help everyone. And a lot of people are catching cancer from pesticides. We seriously need to reconsider instant gratification and limit our consumption of planetary resources, utilizing renewable energy and resources whenever possible. Compassionate caring must be far more important than profit. And in closing, I'd like to bring up Oren Lyons, and Oren Lyons is a faith keeper of the Turtle Clan Onondaga Council of Chiefs and the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations Iroquois Confederacy. And there's some beautiful talks of his online, and I recommend them. But also, he strongly but gently reminds us, and we need to remember that all of creation is interconnected. All of creation is interconnected. And finally, there's a quote whose attribution is in question. However, some believe it was given to us by the Native American chief Seattle, who said, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." Thank you. And at this point, I'd like to move into questions and answers. And we have some time for that. I also wanted to direct our attention to two folks who I invited, and I think they're here today. One is Martha Hennessy, and Martha works often at the Catholic Worker House in the Mary House in Manhattan, and she is an amazing anti-nuclear activist. She was part of the Kings Bay Plowshares action. And I invited Martha here because I wanted hopefully to connect you folks up, Pax Christi Metro, with the Catholic workers here in New York City. And Martha also knew Sister Megan quite well too. And then there is Carol Sargent, I think she's still here. And she has written a book, Transform Now Plowshares, and which will be coming soon. It's at the publisher. And it's about, in part, the Plowshares actions and the larger community, but also a part about Megan and Michael and Greg. And so that's really it. If Carol or Martha at some point would like to offer a reflection on Megan or just a comment on nuclear weapons abolition, that would be tremendous. And please do ask questions.
Well,
Yes.
I can also just very quickly say that John, who's been so wonderful, is all over the book. He was a fantastic source because he knew Megan so well. And Megan told me that, I interviewed her many times, but she told me that John really got it and really knew her well. So I really trusted what he said. And Martha blurbed the book. And so I'm just so happy that, I was deeply honored that Martha would do this because she herself had just served prison time for her action. And during COVID, who sends peace activists to prison during COVID? Who does not have the compassion to understand that this is an exceptional time? But for whatever reason, it happened. And I'm just so honored. I don't really have long comments, but I did want to say that John was my authority in so many ways for so much of what happened, especially in the Nevada desert.
Thank you.
Thanks. And if people have questions for John, please just indicate that in the chats, and we'll call on you as in the order in which you appear. Thank you, John. That was excellent. So
Thank you.
informative on so many levels.
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions? There's a long comment in the chat from Rosemary saying thank you and interested in connecting with you for Upper New York State with her new position as New York State Pax Christi.
Yeah, I can help out on Upper New York State. I know many activists. Jack Gilroy was mentioned earlier. He's a friend, and the upstate drone action community in Syracuse. We work together on drone resistance work and banning killer drones. And we need to, just recently the Ahmadi family was murdered, and the Pentagon said, what a terrible mistake. And what we need, nobody can bring these folks back to life, but there has been so many terrible mistakes, so many wedding parties, so many village gatherings. We need to stop drone assassinations. And we also need to pay reparations. Each one of those family members who were murdered, there should be at least $3 million reparations for each one.
And it should come from the military budget.
Yeah, well, we can't relieve ourselves of a collective responsibility either. I am not innocent, and I still pay some minimal tax too.
Yes.
We all share in the responsibility. We need to take that responsibility seriously.
Yes, and we have a question from Madeline Labriola. Would you like to ask it now, Madeline?
Yeah, I've recently been hearing about climate deniers, many who are well educated and just still don't believe that this is a huge problem. Is that part of psychic numbing, or is it just fear or just stupidity? And do you have any suggestions? Where do you even start with that?
Well, I've run into climate deniers too, and I'm in a town called Gloversville, New York. Actually, I'm in their library because they had a good Wi-Fi. And when I got my haircut, I mentioned something about climate change, and they scoffed and said, "Oh, you're listening to AOC." And I said, "No, sir, I am reading the US military." So if you would read a little bit of what the US military is doing when you meet these scoffers, cite their research and information given, and let these people question the US military. I mean, even when Trump was critical of climate change and denying it also, the military has kept working in preparation. And while I would like to see the military cut tremendously and money, 50% of it taken to work on climate restoration, and put all those bright young men and women to work on climate restoration. I mean, Megan said transform now. Well, we can take those resources. We don't have to put anybody to work, out of work. We can just put them to useful, life-affirming work. So that would be one suggestion.
Thanks, John. Martha Hennessy has a question in the chat. Martha?
Thank you. Yes, good to see you all. John, I know that we just witnessed this horrific trial of Daniel Hale, a drone pilot and whistleblower, and the treatment that he's receiving is just so criminal. Can you give us a sense of what is happening with the Syracuse group and the drone program at Hancock Air Base?
Yeah, we hope to be doing an action next Thursday, I believe. It is in the works. It is planned at the federal building, and we will have a press conference, and also we will bring up reparations for the Ahmadi family and the treatment of Daniel Hale. And I'm not sure how many people know about Daniel Hale. He was in the Air Force, a drone whistleblower, revealed documents that showed that the military was really killing far, far more civilians than they would admit to. As many as 9 out of 10 people killed were actually innocent civilians. And he also revealed a rule book for who they would spy on and surveil and possibly assassinate it. And you didn't actually have to have any wrongdoing documented to be put on that list. And it included American citizens, so our civil liberties were being violated also. And for this, he is sent to prison while the people guilty of assassinations and murder are rewarded. It's clearly Daniel Hale needs to be freed now. And thank you, Martha, for your question. And if you would care to comment on Sister Megan, I know you worked with her, and your amazing nuclear abolition work is just something I so admire.
Thank you, John. Yes, it was just lovely to see her face and hear her voice. She was certainly a huge inspiration to me to gain courage to, try and step up with this approach of going on to these military bases, bringing the body of Christ to the great place of sin. And Megan was just such a strong witness, and her whole history of her dad's medical care and her uncle being in Nagasaki and her next door neighbor in Manhattan, probably working on the Manhattan Project, but keeping it all secret. I just love all of the stories that she had to tell. And, she's our inspiration, and we need to be more visible in Manhattan with regard to the military sites there, hidden in plain sight. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, thank you. Pierre, did you have a question? You just wrote John in the.
Yes, I actually just wrote it in the chat box. It's basically, how can we best make it clear to so many people, even people of faith, who in this country tend to be, very insular. And if something's happening overseas, if there's if there's climate change that's wreaking havoc in the Caribbean or in Southeast Asia, somehow they don't see it as being something that affects them personally. And how can we make people realize that we are on one earth and that any problems which are affecting people overseas, and not just in terms of the climate, but also in terms of militarism, will eventually affect us and our children and our loved ones?
Thank you for a really excellent question, and it's one that all peace activists ponder. I mean, because we have spent a good part of our lives trying to communicate, and clearly we are not as effective as we would like to be. I would suggest that Pax Christi has an important role, that you already know that, that's why you're here, and you need to address your own congregations in a more visible and forceful manner. I think that would help. I have been conducting the Kateri Peace Conference at the St. Kateri National Shrine in Fonda, New York. And in all honesty, many years we had very few people attending, maybe 40 or 50, and very few Catholics, and more so regional peace activists and people genuinely concerned with peace. Unfortunately, we worship at the altar of war in this country, and we spend our money there. And the message of Christ is basically ignored, often by Catholic priests and bishops. So just talk to your congregants. And one of the interesting things was that I could do this at a Catholic shrine because the priest there, Father Kevin Kenny, when I first started, I was closing the School of the Americas. That was my major effort. And he had lived in Guatemala, and he was there in the mid-'80s when the bodies were piling up on the street. And so he knew what I was talking about. And so I didn't have to explain that to him. But being a shrine, he wasn't directly funded by his congregants. And he said that helps too, because if we go anti-war, we see a diminishment in needed funding. But we need for the religious leaders to have courage and speak out. And there is recently, I think the Pope authored the Environmental Works of Mercy. And even if you look at the corporeal works of mercy and apply them in a way, interpret them to apply to all nature, that would be extremely helpful. So those are some things that in the your faith community you certainly can do, and in all faith communities too. We all need to be working for peace. And is it hard to get past American exceptionalism? Yeah, it is.
It is incredibly.
So I wish I had more to offer, but it is a subject for conversation and brainstorming for all of us. And again, thank you. Great question.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, Marion has a comment in the chat about a book review on Hell Breaking Loose, talking about the militarism and climate change. She points that out. Marion, do you want to say something about that?
Well, it's a book by Michael Clare, who's a specialist in peace studies, and he documents the ways that for decades the military has been explaining that climate change is a threat to American security, and that if we don't do anything about it, it's just going to get worse. So I reviewed it, and it's on the web page. If you go to the Pax Christi Metro New York web page and then go to Curix, it's right there, and it's well worth reading. He's a fine writer, and you tend to think that the Pentagon is the enemy, and in many ways, of course, it is. But in another respect, it sees the problem. I mean, even in Iraq, they were using renewable fuel because it was so dangerous to carry weapons, carry oil and stuff in trucks. So it's a good thing. Take a look at the review. It's a pretty good book. Thanks.
Thanks, Marion. Rosemary had a comment about a drone exhibit. Do you want to say something more about that?
Yeah, I'm also, well, I guess it doesn't matter. I was going to try to get my video back if I can figure that out. I know how to do it. I just have to do it. Of course, there's a thing in my way. What am I looking at? Background and filters. Okay, there we go. And I got to take the tape off the little doohickey here. Oh, this high class technology here, I tell you. Yeah, there's, while we were, whoops, how do I have two different things going on at the same time here? Let me see if I can get that corrected. I don't know why that's happening.
Well, it is fascinating.
Yeah, that's very weird. Okay. Oh, I know, because I clicked the wrong thing. Hold on, I'll get this yet. Again, it probably doesn't even matter, but there we go. Maybe that'll do it.
Not yet.
Come on, switch. There we go.
There we go.
I clicked like 3 times for it to work. And I was busy hunting for the information. There's a drone sculpture. It's a huge model of a drone on 30th Street and 10th Avenue, and it's supposed to be there till 2023. And I know there have been some actions there. I haven't gotten there yet myself, but since the topic just came up, I thought, well, maybe it's something we as Pax Christi would like to do. Different groups can do whatever they want over there, I guess, at different times. So if it is something that people would be interested in, we could try to work something out, find a date, find a time, and do whatever we decide to do there, whether it's prayer, study, action, or a little bit of all three. As I said, I haven't been there yet myself, so I've seen pictures of it. So we could figure it out, whether we need to send a posse there first to see it and figure out how it would work out, or just do it.
That's an excellent idea. You could actually bring pictures of the members of the Amidon family who were murdered. And make it very clear. I believe that sculpture doesn't actually have weapons on it, the Hellfire missiles. So some people aren't really aware of the fact that we're piloting killer drones, and that is a killer drone. And the Amidon family and so many others might have happened right in, from Syracuse, New York, but they are secretive, and the information really isn't available. So without, I can't say with certainty that it did. It could have happened at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada or other drone centers too. But yeah, make people aware, be out there in public. That is thoroughly useful, and make it clear too that your group is working on restoring the climate, abolishing nuclear weapons, and in this case particularly ending the drone assassination program. Excellent.
Yeah, and I see Martha mentioned Felton. Yeah, I could get in touch with Felton. I know Peace Action and War Resisters League have also, that's really how I know about it, through them. So we could possibly work with them and maybe get more people that way.
Yeah, we need to build community. You might contact Veterans for Peace too. They have a big chapter in New York City, and you could do a joint action together. They have been at this particular sculpture before. And I'm sure if you propose a joint activity with them, you would be able to go, and you will also have, I mean, it's odd, but as a veteran, I have been given moral authority, being a veteran, and people tend to listen a little bit more, not a lot. Why exactly I'm given moral authority for having done the wrong thing, I really is an amazing question. But I do understand how people do end up in the military too, and that's why, you know, going to your school board, the education, public education that I received had us completely militarized by the time we got out of high school. And that was done through American history, the timeline of American history, you know, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the American Indian War, to a lesser degree, World War I, World War II, Korean War, probably they're teaching the Vietnam War. And this is a normal, healthy human activity, noble kind of presentation. So where's my war? They had it, you know, when I was a kid, they had it waiting for us, or we had it waiting for us, more correctly.
Yes. Good. Kieran, you said you have a question.
Yes. So if I'm correct, you're part of Veterans for Peace, right, John?
Yes, I am.
So I was curious what methods you've used to try to increase the membership or spread the mission of Veterans for Peace, because I know even just thinking about Pax Christi or the peace movement in general and trying to get people involved, often, you know, people don't want to take this on because there seems like a lot of burden from the information or just even the mission of creating peace. So I was wondering if you could share with us any tips on how to do that from your own experience in that group.
Yeah, we, on the national level, we have different people doing different things. We have Gamers for Peace, and that's one effort. And some members who are more media fluent than I, you know, do TikTok videos, I believe. And we all have a problem increasing the peace movement because there is a dependency on what is, you know, the largest entitlement program in the world, and that is the military. But I think I have worked more with artwork. We did one demonstration recently with figures from Alice in Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter. We had big portraits. I painted them. You know, the Cheshire Cat said, "Drone assassinations are madness." And there is just going out and speaking to youth groups, you know, that would help. But it is, you know, it is a difficult problem. And if we don't, we will really see environmental collapse more so than we have. One thing I would do differently, rather than starting a peace conference at this point, and I really wonder why there was so few peace conferences around that I know of. I would probably start it as an environmental conference, hoping to appeal to younger folks, because many of us are aging out. And the environment, I am told, is of great concern to the young people, as well as it should be. I mean, I am greatly concerned and experience some of that climate anxiety also. So I would probably do an environmental peace conference or an environmental conference, and then bring in the military as one of the areas we really need to pay attention to. And why? Because of the massive fossil fuel use, radioactive materials all over the country, chemical pollutants released into the environment, et cetera. And there are, you know, clearly there are no green wars. But as I say, there are no green wars, I would also venture to say that there are many, many people in the United States which would just say, what does that mean? There are no green wars. So the way you word your messaging is very important. And we really need to look at that carefully. I've been doing different experimentation with it. We did a vigil at Hancock Field, which on Valentine's Days, which had huge hearts and quotes from a variety of sources. Of course, Martin Luther King was one, and but we used Cornel West, you know, the quote, justice is what love looks like in public on a heart, or Bruce Springsteen, what if what you are doing to survive is killing the things you love? I mean, I guess Martin Luther King was the best way to transform a enemy is make him a friend. I'm not sure, I think that's King. The other thing that I mean, to me, it's been really important. I mean, I think it was Phil Bergen, might have been Howard Zinn or Dan for that matter, but one of the sayings, civil disobedience is not the problem, civil obedience is. But just get out, you know, get out there and do something in public, be it speaking at a school board meeting, be it doing a vigil, and have some good literature, and people will join you. But it is a slow process.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a question?
I don't have a question. This is Anne. But you know, when we were kind of putting this in place, I went online and looked up the Drone Action website, and there seemed to be, John, a lot of creative ways, different banners and different activities you did. And I think it, you know, could be worth for us to maybe look at that to get ideas about maybe being creative in an action. So it's just something that we might want to take a look at.
Yeah, you can look at the Bread and Puppet Theaters too. They did tremendous work during the war in Vietnam and still are. And, you know, one thing I saw that I really liked, one environmental group just rented a parking space on a city street and transformed it into a garden. You know, they put down astroturf and a chair and a lamp and some flowers, and it was a stunning display. And they didn't keep it there long, but creative use of public space with art and with music, very instrumental. So those are a couple more suggestions.
Anyone else?
You know, one thing, I mean, a lot of things that I've worked on, I end up doing a tremendous amount of research, and you know, the internet is great for research, so that really makes it easy. And you know, you learn so much. I mean, one of the reasons, you know, and I am curious if anybody actually knows who read what article I wrote and then I ended up with this invitation to speak here. If anybody can find that out, that is a question I have for your group. But in doing the research, I mean, even as I researched this talk, I got to see so many wonderful speakers and consider different materials. Somebody had asked about World Beyond War earlier too, if anybody knew of them. David Swanson is World Beyond War. He is a dynamo. Greta Zorro is here in upstate New York, fairly close to the city of Utica. She is an organizer for World Beyond War and runs a biodynamic farm and trains young people in farming. And she finds that, you know, if you can offer really useful skills, young people are tremendously interested in learning and very enthusiastic, but she is excellent. World Beyond War is just a wonderful organization run by David Swanson and other people. I highly endorse them. I did quickly want to mention too, Bending the Arc, you mentioned it in the introduction, striving for peace and justice in the age of endless war. It is a good research. And as I spoke to Ann, we talked about my royalties, which were highly amusing. We didn't write this book to be a moneymaker. We did it as a labor of love. And SUNY Press published it, and they were wonderful to work with it, but I wish they had priced the book a little lower. Anyway, back to the royalties. For my first year with sharing it with the other editors, we each had royalties of 72 cents. So I'm amused by it and slightly irritated. But with that said, buy a used copy. I'm not worried about royalties. Never was and won't be. You can save a lot of money. It has essays by Medea Benjamin, Kathy Kelly, David Swanson, Ann Wright, Jim Jennings, who runs Conscience International, David Lawrence Davidson, who I'm trying to say, a man by the name of Jim Merkel, who's quite an environmentalist, and I'm sure Ed Canan, and there are about 15 different authors in this book, and it's a good book, and it has useful references. And if you do happen to buy it, I recommend you read the introduction first, then read the conclusion, and then read different chapters as you might find interesting. And everybody will have their own favorites.
John, this is Donna Gabriel. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Donna.
Great. So Pax Christi had that course, I guess it was in the summer, War in the Environment. And then the United States pulled out of Afghanistan. And I keep wondering what was left behind, what environmental damage we tore up in Afghanistan. I was wondering what you knew.
You know, honestly, I have to assume it's been a huge amount of environmental damage. And obviously there was a huge social disruption, and how it's going to be reorganized by the Taliban, I have no idea. So in all honesty, I don't have a lot of information on the environmental destruction of Afghanistan. However, they've been at war with us for 20 years, and preceding that, there was the Soviet Union occupying Afghanistan, and so I'm sure they have suffered greatly.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. Oh, am I muted? No. Okay. Thank you very much. And we're really holding close to the schedule, which is wonderful. So I'd like now just to see if there are anyone who has announcements to make of events or anything to go in. And well, thank you, John. That was wonderful. And thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
They were very, very clear and specific and useful.
Great. And thanks so much again for having me. And is it Kieran or Kin? I look like K-I-N.
Kieran.
Kieran. Okay, it looks like. Anyway, thank you so much for your technical support, and again, everybody who's working, and please keep up the good work for peace. I did look at your website. You've done a tremendous amount of work. You have some great educational programs. Get out there and keep pushing. And together, community is important. If you can, connect with the Catholic worker here in New York City, connect with Veterans for Peace. We really need to work together and create what is often termed the beloved community. But community is essential. We need each other to support each other and hold each other up. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, John. I just wanted to add that I've put some links in the chat to the presentations and other peacemakers that John referenced in his keynote today. So I'll also put some descriptions of their work in the chat as well. And just want to say thank you very much for what you've shared with us today.
Wonderful.
And if I may, I think Madeline wanted to say something. This is Rosemary, but I also want to let you know, John, that we've been marching with Veterans for Peace in the Veterans Day Parade for a number of years.
Excellent.
So yeah, we're pretty connected. So and
Great.
Catholic worker and yeah, the
Great.
whole crew. It's a great community.
Great.
Thanks. But Madeline, I think you wanted to say.
Yeah, just quickly, because I know we're running out of time, and you all heard this, but if you want to know a little bit more about Pax Christi's work in nuclear weapons, we're savvy enough now to have a Pax Christi Facebook page. I agree with Rosemary. I wish we had a different platform. And so you can go on Pax Christi Rhode Island and look at the actual banner and the poster that we put up in the bus stop shelters. They were up for 4 months. It cost about $5,000 and we raised the money. So, you know, we'd like to do it again. But I think, again, it's awareness, as you're saying, John, letting people know. I think there's unfortunately still people who don't even realize that nuclear weapons are still a problem. There's some part of them that's like, oh, that was the 70s. We don't do that, you know. So awareness is really important. But if you want to see what it looked like and even, again, use it for your own needs, it's on that we have a website and a Facebook page and a Twitter account, which I don't know how to use, but anyway, so that's my little contribution to take a look at that. Thank you.
Good, thank you.